Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door NetAdmin. It's the last Monday of the month, which means it's time for a Freeform. And while I have a little bit of an idea what I'm going to talk about, I don't know everything I'm going to talk about, so this is going to be as much of a surprise to me as it is for you. Comments. I only had one comment of note in the last month, which was somebody mentioning that they felt that my build for the new OpenSense server for one client was BS because all that would be needed for a router would be a dual-core CPU and a quad-port PCIe gigabit card. And if I was building just a pure router, yeah, probably, but I'm not. So there's a lot of other factors to consider there. And in a similar fashion, in my last video, I spoke about how creativity is a necessary thing when you are a NetAdmin or a sysadmin, but it's not the whole story. In a similar fashion, cost, in the sense of having it be the absolute cheapest you can do, is also not the only attribute that you should be looking for. A network admin's job, or part of the job, is to keep everything in balance. In the same way that building a creative solution is great, but it doesn't mean that you can slack off on doing other necessary work or getting other necessary equipment. Making sure that everything is super cheap can actually backfire on you quite significantly. If you build a system for really cheap and it doesn't do the necessary job, what good is it to the client? It's a waste. It's pointless. And your time spent setting it up was also pointless. If you purchase a system that does the job for a year before the growth of the business means that you need to replace it, you haven't done your job. There is a process of wanting to estimate ahead for reasonable growth. And it is entirely possible, if you planned to have something that should sustain 5 years of growth, if the business grows far and away beyond what you ever estimated and you have to replace it after 3 years instead of 5, okay, that is part of normal variation. But if you buy something, it should be able to reasonably handle a lot of expected business growth. And if you're not planning ahead for that, then my particular position on that would be that you're not doing your job correctly. And you can actually extend this principle into other things. At the time that this video is being released, on Monday, I am supposed to be in Red Deer, Alberta. I don't currently know if I'm going to be. It's supposed to be a 3-day visit to a customer site where I'm supposed to be going through 2 buildings, assessing the entire network, top to bottom, multi-story buildings, and figuring out, A, what the previous provider did to make such an awful job of it, arguably, and 2, figure out how we can revise the network and replace some equipment and bring everything together in a way that makes a little more sense and functions a little bit better for the client's needs. But like I said, I don't know if I'm actually going to be out there right now because I was not in charge of booking travel arrangements in this case. And one of the primary objectives used by the person who did book the travel was cost. It's not like we're paying for it. My company is not paying for it. The client is paying for it. And the client is willing to pay for it. The willingness is not an issue. But some people in my company have, through long force of habit, become very devoted to saving as much money as they possibly can. And I'll explain what I mean. Our flights were booked on 126-3343 Alberta Incorporated. Now, you're probably sitting there and going, that doesn't really sound like an airline. And you're right, it doesn't sound like an airline. But that's actually the legal business name for what used to be now Lynx Air. And they just went bankrupt. And they're going to be ceasing operations about 7 hours before our scheduled flight. Meaning we're not going to have a flight out to Red Deer anymore. And the cost is so cheap. The maximum allowable luggage space is something like 6 inches by 11 inches by 15 inches. Thereabouts. I'm not quoting exactly. It's off the top of my head, and I may have misremembered some of those dimensions. I know the 6 inches part is correct because that number stuck in my head. But that's like barely briefcase sized. And I'm supposed to be going through 2 buildings, 7 stories, top to bottom, assessing the network. I'm going to need my laptop. I'm going to need some cables. I'm going to need equipment to connect to routers or switches through their console port. Standard stuff, power adapters, any additional like hardwired Ethernet ports that I might require for my computer. All my gear, batteries, phone, chargers, whole 9 yards. Plus, I'm assuming I'm probably supposed to bring, clothes for 3 days. How am I supposed to fit all of this in the space that's less than a briefcase? I could do one of those. I could bring all my tech equipment, or I could bring clothes, plus, ablutionary requirements, shampoo, toothbrush, toothpaste, comb, yada, yada, yada. But I can't do both in that space. Now, we could have purchased additional luggage space, which would make sense. It's necessary. It's needed. Did we purchase additional luggage space? No. Why not? Because we're trying to make it as cheap as possible. And then you turn around and you tell us, the employees, yeah, if you need more luggage space, you buy that. We need the ability to do our job. Why aren't we thinking about this? It is a reasonable business expense to think ahead and to say, we're going to need more space for this. Why don't we just purchase it so that we can actually do our job, instead of purchasing something that only gives us half of what we need and then saying the rest of it is somebody else's responsibility. And it's on an airline that is so cheap, they can't even maintain operations, and they're bankrupt before we even get to use the tickets that were purchased. How did this make any sense whatsoever? Any sense? How did that make any sense? It would have been better, easier, cheaper to just have bought a seat on one of the actual airlines that has an actual name instead of a number and has reasonable luggage space ahead of time rather than trying to arrange stuff at the last minute. Pursuit of the absolute cheapest option is not always the best choice. The same is true with servers. It took me years and years and years of harping on people in my company that no, software RAID, yes, it's cheaper, but you can only run it with Windows. It's less performant, it's not as reliable, and it doesn't rebuild automatically if something goes crazy, because it requires that the operating system survived so that the drivers can coordinate the rebuild. If you're using a traditional RAID array, software RAID is not the way to go. It's a bad idea. And there have been times where I spec'd, hardware RAID, because that's a thing I do. Does it cost $200 more? Yes, it costs $200 more. But that $200 meant that when I ran into a problem and had to switch to, in this case, VMware ESXi, because of limitations that were in Hyper-V at the time, ESXi wouldn't have worked with software RAID. It only works with hardware RAID. By spending the extra $200, I gave myself enough flexibility so that when I ran into unexpected difficulties, I was able to pivot and move on with something else, instead of telling the customer, yeah, sorry, this $5,000 purchase you bought can't be used in the way that we thought. We're going to have to buy something new entirely. Just spend the extra $200 up front and get a system that will actually do what it should, what it really should. And I'm not suggesting that you overbuild everything. There is zero need to purchase a Cadillac solution if what you need is a Mazda 3. There's no point. It's wasteful to buy your Rolls Royce of systems when what you need is a Honda Civic to bop to the grocery store and back. So there's a balance to be had between doing something that is fiscally prudent, not overpaying and not overbuilding beyond what you really need, but also you can't just go with the cheapest solution, because that's not going to do what you want it to. Enough about that, I suppose. Other news at the moment, since we're talking about going off to Alberta anyway, I am not moving to Alberta. I have no desire to move to Alberta, but I am currently applying to begin my Master of Science in Information Systems, and that will be from Athabasca University in Alberta. Couple reasons I went with Athabasca is, number one, they have the correct program. They have the program I'm looking for. I'm not looking for computer science. I do not do algorithm design. I don't write software. I do write scripts. That's part of a network admin and sysadmin job, but I don't write software as like a living. But they have the program that I want in information systems. Cool. But they are also very big on distance learning, which means that I can be working on that while still working my job full time. So that's really exciting for me, and I'm looking forward to it. I do need to finish off the application because it needs to be submitted by month's end. So I'm rapidly running out of time on that. So I'll probably go back to doing that later today, either right after I record this video or after I edit it. I don't know, but it needs to be done. So I'm going to continue working on that. And yeah, in all honesty, I recorded an earlier version of this and I got a lot more ranty about things and I didn't like it. It didn't feel right. So I sat down and went, I need to do a better version of the Freeform. Just that it's Freeform doesn't mean that I have free license, let's say. Freeform does mean I can go a little bananas, but I still want it to feel good. I want to, it's important that it feels good for both me as the person who makes it and for you, the person who unfortunately has to watch it. Although I suppose you don't have to, and I appreciate that you do. So thank you as well to everybody who is watching it, because I appreciate that. What else? Oh, I did get my Framework laptop. I have not dragged it on camera here for the Freeform because there's a lot of people doing teardowns, and you can see most of what they're doing. I am going to talk a little bit later on in another video about how I'm setting mine up, because I'm doing a few things with it that probably is not typical, but we'll see. I have no idea. It's not like I've taken a poll of all the Framework 16 users on the forums and said, hey, is everybody going to do this? I haven't done that, so I don't know how typical or atypical what I'm doing actually is. But hopefully I'll be able to do a little bit of a deeper dive on that, and that will be interesting for you to watch in the near future. But I did receive it. It's here. I am absolutely excited. I've already fully disassembled and reassembled it 4 times for various people. Like I said, I have to kind of take it on the road show and show everybody because everybody wants to see it. So that's a thing. But other than that, yeah. Just the usual amount of networks and servers and other work to be done, database migrations and profile moves and all the rest. But yeah, so there you go. February, done and dusted. The Freeform officially closes it up. And then there's a couple more days to go, of course. But you know, as far as the Nextdoor NetAdmin is concerned, this closes off February. So hopefully some of those ruminations were mildly interesting. Maybe they were thought-provoking. I could certainly hope that they were. But for now, I am your Nextdoor NetAdmin. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.